All right. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Productive Environment Podcast, Pep Talk. This is your Pep Talk for this week, and we are excited that you are here. So I'll give you guys a second to get on, and we are going to jump right into today's topic. And as you can see on the beautiful thumbnail, that it's not just stuff. Okay, so when we talk about organizing, it's not just stuff. And specifically at Productive Environment Institute, we talk about organizing paper, email, digital information, binders, business type things versus other things like memorabilia or closets or attics or garages. However, everything that we talk about as it relates to paper and digital information and email also applies to those other areas, especially today's conversation. Okay, so everybody get settled in. And I just want to remind you all, let me go ahead and remove that so you can see Barbara and I. So you can see Barbara and me, I think is the grammatically correct way to say that. Is that right, Mom?
Your mother would be proud of you.
She drilled that stuff in my head. She used to make me repeat it over and over until I got it right. But I just want to remind everybody that this conversation is, if you've been following us for a little while, this conversation is part of a short series on assessment. But you do not need to have heard the others for this to be helpful to you. And I just want to give you some context. Okay, so we in Productive Environment Institute, we have a 9-step plan or 9-step path that we lead clients through to go from overwhelmed to optimized. And we are sitting here, we are still right here in this very first step in this series. Okay, so we are still right here under assess. And we will link in the show notes below on YouTube. So wherever you're watching us from, make your way over to our YouTube channel, and you will have links to the previous events as well, the previous discussions that we have had. So let me go ahead and remove that. Just wanted to give you guys some context of where we are. So many people, this is going to be such a good conversation. So settle in. Many people come into organizing thinking that it's going to be practical and straightforward, right? Sort the paper, clean up the inbox, put things where they belong. And then they're surprised when it feels heavy, emotional, even draining. And that applies, I want to share briefly, and then I'm going to tell you who we are in just a minute, but that applies to organizers and organizees. So if you're watching this podcast and you are someone who wants to get organized, be organized, learn some tips and some steps and some strategies to get organized, we consider you, we lovingly call you an organizee. Okay. And then there are organizers. These are people that are they're a professional organizer, they're a productivity consultant. If they're one of our team members, they are a certified productive environment specialist. And I just had an experience. We just had an experience I'm going to tell you about in just a minute, but let me just tell you who we are. I am Andrea Anderson, CEO of Productive Environment Institute, and I am in Carolina Beach, North Carolina, joined on this podcast by...
I'm Barbara Hemphill, founder of Productive Environment Institute. And as you can see, I'm usually in my office, but today I'm at my church, one of my favorite places to be, because the traffic was bad and I got caught before I got home. So here I am.
I love it. It's like another office space. So it's perfect. That's why we love what we do so much. We can kind of do it anywhere. Yeah, I want to go back and just tell you about an experience that one of our specialists just had, is to go through our certification program to become a certified productive environment specialist, certified in all the things that Barbara has developed over these past almost 50 years. We have a program, we have a training program that they go through. And part of that program is to work with a real person, to actually demonstrate what they've learned and go into someone else's home office, or a business office, and do what we call an office transformation with that person. So the newest our newest certified productive environment specialist just did that. And she did a fantastic job. She had she's actually been a client for quite some time. So she knows our systems inside and out. She's actually, Barbara, she's followed you for over 20 years. So she knows our stuff, y'all. She knows what we do. She knows what we teach. She's implemented in her own space, and she's very good at it. However, when she worked with this client, and then we did a debrief with the team after, she said, the one thing that surprised me that I wasn't expecting was the emotion. Her client, who's a friend, became very emotional during the process. And she was like, oh my gosh, what do I do here? You know, we've talked about emotion, but she's I'm not going to say her name on here, but she's a very straight thinker, and like, just, you know, she was caught off guard a little bit by the emotion, because she went in logistically. She was logistically prepared, planned, everything in order, and was, you know, executing perfectly. And the client was feeling emotional and overwhelmed a little bit at first, and just like, oh my goodness, what are we doing? I will give you I'll give you a spoiler alert, that it turned out perfectly. It turned out wonderfully. She did everything right, and the client felt supported, and the client is moving along and keeping up with her on how it's actually working for her. Yeah, and that she's really happy that she did it. But so the client and the organizer can feel that. They feel that emotion, right, Barbara? It's like, you know, you wrote a whole book on the emotional side of organizing. So,
well, I remember when the first time I recognized emotion, I started with closets, because that's one of the first things that people had. And I can remember standing in a closet, pulling out an item and showing it to the client. I can remember, I don't even remember what city it was in. I don't remember her name, but I remember the look on her face. And I said, how does this make you feel? And her answer was guilty. And so then out of that evolved this thing about anything that makes you feel anything negative, whether it's guilty or lazy or whatever, is an emotion you can't afford. But then you do have to. And then with paper, I realized that paper is just paper, right? Why should that be so hard? But it's because it's what the paper represents. The paper represents your hopes, your dreams, your fears, your expectations. And that's the reason paper is probably the hardest. Digital and other things, and so I've often said to people, in fact, I was a speaker this week to somebody who was dealing with a lot of stuff, and she's an artist, so she wanted to deal with her art stuff first, but she also had paper. And I said, let's deal with the paper first, because what you learn from dealing with the paper will flow over into everything else.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. So remember that point. Let me share a couple of comments that are coming through. Here's Pam. Hey, Pam. Emotional attachments keep a lot of people stuck. Yep, that's true. Pam is an organizer as well. Emotional attachments keep a lot of people stuck. And so it's kind of like when you finally get to the point where you're ready for some help, Barbara, as you put it, you know, you have to go through the emotion. Having the emotion is not bad. Having the emotion doesn't mean you failed or you're a failure. It's just emotion. Having those emotions are just bringing up, it's information, really. It's information
and going through it is critical. If you don't go through it, you will get stuck. You may move forward, but eventually, and you know, that's true in all emotion. All counselors, you know, will tell. I mean, in my own personal life, I grew up in a family where we didn't cry and we didn't get angry. Well, if you don't process that emotion, at some point you have to process it. So.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I want to do a shout out to Dan in Oregon. How you doing, Dan? Glad you're here. Awesome. So wherever you guys are joining from, feel free to pop a comment in the chat. Let us know where you are. So, you know, let's talk about why decluttering and organizing triggers those emotions. As we just kind of shared, paper, email, time, possessions, they're not neutral, right? They represent things. They represent responsibilities. They represent expectations. They represent unfinished or postponed decisions. They represent parts of our past and sometimes parts of who we thought we were going to be, right? And so when we look at clutter or overload, we're often not reacting to the mess itself. We're reacting to what it represents. And that can be really scary, right? Yeah, in fact, scary. Here we go. Nancy, yikes. Emotions, yikes. It's a big deal. It is a big deal. It absolutely is a big deal. So, and so basically, just to reiterate, we're not reacting to the clutter necessarily. We're reacting to what it represents. Okay. So for some examples, Barbara, you said the number one is paper, and I agree with that. Paper equals responsibility, history, postponed decisions.
Well, our email, look at email. I mean, everybody probably emails one of the biggest productivity drains is email.
Yeah, email.
Full of emotion.
That's right. Email, expectations, pressure, unanswered requests, like, I don't want to look at it,
Or feeling responsible. I mean, one of the really big ones is being a responsible person.
Yeah.
And the emotion that ties all of these together most often is fear. Fear of not being responsible, fear of forgetting, fear of making a mistake, fear of offending someone. All of those are where that emotion really wraps up. Most of the time, there's some fear involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about paper, email, just stuff, general stuff. This fits in what you just said, Barbara. Money spent, your identity. Maybe you have things that are part of your identity. Barbara, your identity. Think about the things you have that represent you, your identity, your piano for one, you're a musician.
Well, the one that I think about is because for years, decades, I was known as the paper tiger lady. Mm-hmm. And my house and office, my wardrobe was full of things, jungle paraphernalia.
Yeah.
And at one point I decided that I was tired of wearing gold and black and brown, and I needed a new wardrobe. And so I redid that. But I hired a feng shui consultant. And when she came into my home and office, she's saying, how do you feel about all this stuff? And then I realized some of it was stuff. So I lethally went through and got rid of a lot of it. So I probably have maybe 10% of what I have collected through the years. So a lot of people, and that was painful. I mean, letting it go, because a lot of it was gifts that were given to me, things that I spent a lot of money on or things like that. And I did have to go through the emotion. But here's the bottom line. If you're not willing to go through that emotion, you're not allowing any space for anything new to come in. So I literally, if I would go to an art gallery and I saw something I really loved, I couldn't get it because I didn't have a place to put it.
Yeah.
And now I have we just renovated our house and I had to take down all the pictures on the wall in order to do that. And I was going to put them all back up, and I thought, no, I'm not. So there are some walls in the house right now where I didn't get rid of the pictures yet because I was like, I might want them back. But I put them down and left the walls blank. And lo and behold, I went to an open house with somebody and there was an artist there and they had a painting that I just loved and I bought it. So it's going to replace some of the things that were up there. So that's moving forward and growing in our appreciation and our ability to accomplish our work and enjoy our life is where we're all about. And this is an example.
Yeah, exactly. And then another piece of this is time. So we're talking about paper, we talked about email, we talked about general stuff, but also our time. We have limits, we have trade-offs. If we do this, maybe we can't do that. Changing energy. So all of those things can trigger emotions. And
for time, the one thing I want to mention that I think is really critical is often people overestimate the amount of time it's going to take to clear up that mess. And then we don't do it. And we spend, if you measured the amount of time you procrastinated about doing it, you could have done it 5 or 10 times.
That is so true. Guilty. That is so true.
We all are. I mean,
yeah.
Who doesn't have that problem someplace?
That's right. So sometimes, the key point of this part of the discussion is that the emotion often feels too big for the task because the task isn't necessarily the real trigger. It's something else that is bringing something up for you. So when people, including us sometimes, avoid their paper piles or their inbox or even their calendar, to Barbara's point with the time, it's easy to label that as procrastination or lack of discipline. Have you guys ever felt that? Like, oh, I'm procrastinating. I must be lazy. Something's wrong with me. But more often than not, avoidance is a form of protection. It's a way of not triggering guilt, disappointment, or self-judgment. If I ignore it, then I don't have to feel the stuff that I feel like I'm going to feel if I go through it. And so, but we can only avoid things for so long, right? And talking about avoidance doesn't mean that you don't care. It actually often means that you care deeply. And you're maybe just you're not ready at that moment. And that's where.
I care deeply. One of the things that comes up here, in fact, I just had a conversation with someone a few minutes ago who was talking about all the stuff her husband keeps. And she was saying, he has all this emotion about this. What is this about? She just didn't understand it. And it's because he cares deeply about the people that gave the stuff to him.
Yeah. So that brought that up. Yeah. So, avoidance is commonly misinterpreted, right? But it's really an emotional self-protection, fear of judgment from others and ourselves. And here's a big one, especially at this time of year, I believe, as we're moving towards tax season. At the time of this recording, it's January of 2026. So taxes are coming up. Tax season's coming up. So how many of you are avoiding looking at that stuff? And this is a fear, Barbara, you talked about fear of discovering how bad it is. So whether it's your taxes or your finances or medical paperwork, or just business stuff in general, paper in general. If you find yourself ignoring or avoiding certain areas, maybe you have a fear of discovering how bad it is.
Or fear of not being able to find it. That's a huge one. And I cannot let this opportunity pass without saying, as it relates to taxes, if you're in the middle of doing that right now is the time to figure out how to take away the fear of not being able to find it for next year. And we at PEI talk all the time about system. We use the acronym saving you space, time, energy, and money. And if there's ever any place where that is critical, it's related to taxes. So as you're doing it this year, when you realize you don't have what you need, or it took you longer to find it than you did, now's the time to put the system in place so that next year it won't be, it's not going to be fun. Taxes are never fun, but it will take away an enormous amount of the stress and probably a lot of the ugly discussions that go on in between couples when people are trying to do it too.
That's right. I remember you shared that exact advice on our PEPTalk podcast, one or more of our PEPTalk podcasts at the beginning of last year. So I'm hoping that some people that are on here now were here last year, and maybe you took Barbara's advice, and we're still here in January. It's not like we're talking to you guys at the beginning of April. We still have time for this. So let's not avoid it all the way up until April 15th. And you said taxes aren't fun. Dan is on here, and he is a retired accountant. So Dan, are taxes fun for you, or were taxes fun for you? I can imagine. My mom's a math teacher, and she always says, math is fun. I'm like, no, it's not.
No, it's not.
If you're doing what you love, for some people, I guess it is, right?
And thank goodness there are people who do love
right.
it. I mean, we wouldn't have a company without it, right?
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So just remember, reframe it. This is a good reframe, that avoidance is not failure. It's a signal. It's a signal that something's going on. That something's going on with that information. So this is where we talked about your identity. So this is where things get a little tangled. We see information, how much paper there is, how many emails are unread, how little margin we have, and we turn that information into a story about ourselves. For example, I'm behind. I can't keep up. You guys, is this resonating with anybody? I should be better at this by now. But information is just describing a situation. It's not making a statement about your worth, your intelligence, or your effort. Okay. So what you see is information. It's not a verdict about yourself. It's not a judgment. So here's an example of information and identity. Okay. And tangling, when we tangle these up, that's where a lot of this emotion comes from. Information. I have a lot of paper. And then the identity is I'm disorganized. Do you see that? So it's like, I have a lot of paper. So you attach that identity to yourself. I'm disorganized. My inbox is full. That's the information. I can't keep up is an identity that comes from that information, right? I don't know where to start. And you might interpret that in your identity as I failed. And that's just not the case. So assessment becomes possible when information is no longer tied to identity. So you can really get a clear look at what is going on. What's the reality? Because Barbara says you can't change what you don't measure, and you've got to be able to separate the information about your situation from your actual identity. And Dan is responding here. He says, I enjoy taxes, but some of the detail is easy to put off dealing with. Yeah. Okay. So even for you, that's right. So
and I think, isn't that true of most things?
Yeah.
I mean, most of the things that we like to do. In fact, when people come into our program to be certified productive environment specialists, I always tell them that 80% of the time you should be doing something that you would do whether you got paid or not, because it's how God created you. And 20% of the time, well, there's going to be those details that you have to take care of, that's not
right.
so much fun. But I would say to them, if it gets to be more than 20%, then we need to talk, because it means there's something wrong with the system and we have to go back. So Dan, one of the things to think about always with anything we do is like, is there anything I could do to make those details less overwhelming? Is there something I could do? Templates, or asking other people to help, or again, doing something to tweak the system.
Yeah. And what just came to my mind, Barbara, is most accountants now send out a checklist. They send you, because I can imagine without that in the past, probably before somebody came up with the idea of the checklist, it was like, hey, can you send me this? Hey, can you send me that? Hey, did you do this? Hey, did you spend that? Did you buy this? Now that's all on a checklist. For most CPAs, they just send, hey, fill this out and answer the question. So that is one way to simplify things. But yeah, there's still a lot of details there. So, looking honestly at something and how you're feeling about your situation and your piles does not mean necessarily fixing it right away. We just want you to look at it. It doesn't mean you're making any decisions yet. It certainly doesn't mean that you're doing everything all at once, because you can overwhelm yourself going, oh, I have paper and I have email and I have piles and here and there. It's like, let's slow down. It just simply means that you're allowing yourself to notice, there's that word again, that you're noticing what's there, okay, without immediately attaching meaning to it. So we got to slow down our emotions and just look at the stuff as information. So when we slow down interpretation, we create space to respond thoughtfully instead of react emotionally, okay? And so gentleness is what makes honesty sustainable. Thank you, Ed. Gentleness is what makes honesty sustainable. So a few reminders for you as we get towards wrapping this podcast up is that looking at your information, looking at your reality does not mean fixing it right now, just looking, okay? Naming it, saying, okay, here's a pile of paper, does not mean judging. You're not saying, here's a pile of paper and I'm so disorganized. You're just looking, you're just seeing it. Okay. Seeing it does not mean that you're committing to action right now. You're just seeing it. We just want you to see it. Okay. You're allowed to pause. You guys heard 2 of our podcasts this month. We talked about the pause, 2 different kinds of pauses. So those will be linked in the description if you missed those. And you are allowed to stop. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to slow down and see what you're actually dealing with regards to your paper, your email, your overload, your information. Okay. So this week isn't about action steps still. And if you've been following our short series, we haven't given you any actions really yet. It's really just been looking at, evaluating, considering, and that's part of the whole assessment process, right? So it's about noticing where emotion shows up before you even begin. Where do you hesitate? Okay. So these are things we want you to pay attention to this week. Where do you hesitate? What feels heavy before you even touch it? Like, is there a pile on your desk or near your desk or on the floor or on the credenza behind you that you look at, you're like, oh, okay. So what is it? What is it? And what are you afraid that you'll see or feel? Okay. You don't need to answer those questions to us. You don't need to write them down. We just want you to notice them. Okay. Awareness without judgment is progress. There's one for you. Awareness without judgment is progress. So a couple of things you might look at are, where do I avoid looking? What am I avoiding? What areas what am I avoiding looking at? What feels heavy before I start? And what story am I telling about myself? Okay. All right. So as we start wrapping up, and Barbara, I'll give you the last word after I let them know what we want them to do next. I'll give you a wrap up word. But if decluttering and organizing feels emotional, that doesn't disqualify you from making progress. Okay. It explains your experience. It's the reality. So next week, we will talk about how assessment helps you decide what actually deserves your attention and what can wait. Not everything needs fixing right now. And assessment is how we learn the difference. In fact, I was talking just yesterday with the new certified productive environment specialist I was telling you about at the beginning. And she's still working through her own stuff. And I said, okay, let's get the big picture out. Let's see everything that you still want to do for your own space. And so she listed it all out. And then we looked at each thing and she said, this one is not as much of a priority. I can live with where it is for a while. So then we bumped up the things that are priorities to her. So just by making the list, it got it out of her head. And now she's zeroed in and laser focused on one area. So we took in all the information, we put it out, I would say on paper, but it was on her SOAR board or on our SOAR board. And now it's out of her head. So that's what we want you to do. We want you to just assess where you are, know that not everything needs fixing right now. And we want you to learn the difference. So emotion explains the experience. It doesn't define you. Okay. And I'm going to give you 2 things we would like for you to do. Well, actually, let me give you 3 things we'd like for you to do after this. So first of all, we would love for you to like this video on YouTube. Share this video with someone else that you think could benefit from it, and be sure you're subscribed. We would love for you to subscribe to our channel, and then that way our videos will surface for you. And then we would like for you to join us for our upcoming live workshop. It is on February the 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Okay, so coming up on February 2/12 at 1 p.m. Eastern. Go to workshop.productiveenvironment.com. Go ahead and put that back up for a sec. Thanks. Workshop.productiveenvironment.com, and you can sign up for our workshop. You've heard us mention SOAR board. SOAR means systemize, and organize with action and reference. And in that workshop, you will get your SOAR board. So it's included in that workshop. We will show you how to set up your own SOAR board where you can track everything in your life, literally. Okay. If you're brand spanking new to us, another thing you can do is go get a short training right now at lesscluttermorelife.com. So you can go get a short training, lesscluttermorelife.com. So those are the two things, the workshop and then a short training that you can actually watch at this moment. And Barbara, I'm going to pass it over to you to wrap us up.
Well, I want to go back, begin with the end in mind. Organizing in and of itself has no value. It is to help you do something. Proverbs says, without a vision, the people perish. So I would encourage you to think about, if you were more organized and if you weren't worried, what would you do? And I gave a speech over the weekend, and there was an artist there who was dealing with lots and lots of clutter. And one of the things I suggested to her was, she wasn't doing anything with her art because it's like, I got to get organized first. And so I said, let's turn it around. Identify a specific plan of when you will do something in your art, and that will touch your heart, and that will give you more courage to deal with the emotion of the things that you don't need.
Love it. Love it. All right. Thank you, Barbara. And thank you all for joining us, whether you're here with us live. Thank you for that. Or you're watching this replay. So get in touch. You saw what, we sent you to the workshop and to the free training, and we will see you on the next episode of PEPTalk. And thank you, Miss Pam. Lots of quotable nuggets. Good. Hope you got some screenshots there, or you can watch the replay and get them again. All right. Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye.